My mum left Africa for a better life in the UK. But in some ways, for people emigrating to the UK from Africa and other countries, are finding it more difficult now than ever. Why is this? Well, a major issue is the cost of living. Prices have skyrocketed, and this is not just for your rent or to buy a house, it's for your everyday essentials. So people moving to the UK for a better life, for earning more money, and this may be the case if you convert into your currency. However, this is quickly offset by the cost of living, when more than half of your salary is going towards your rent, then you're having to pay for your food, your expenses. People are unable to own anything. Often people are having to rent, they're having to lease a car, or to buy a very old second-hand car, and having to rent their phone and paying a monthly subscription on their phone. So you're having to pay a lot. And even when it comes to transport, the UK has a wonderful transport system, especially in the busy cities. However, if you are using these regularly, costs can start to add up. If you're unable to use public transport and go for a car, you have the added expenses. You have your car insurance, you have your MOT and the maintenance of the car. So these costs can quickly add up. So moving to the UK may not be as glamorous as it used to be. Before, you could come to the UK and you could work hard in almost any job, save up some money, and eventually buy a property. But today, that's nearly impossible. Many people are having to work more than one job just to survive for many, many years to even have some hope to start saving some money. So that's the reality of the UK. When people arrive in the UK, they face a culture shock. A lot of people in the UK are not the most friendliest of people, so it can be difficult to make new friends and make connections, especially when you don't have a lot of family support and family network. So that will be a huge shock to your system if you come from a culture where you're surrounded by people and you have an extended family. Arriving in the UK, it's very difficult to build that. A lot of people are constantly stressed because they have to work so hard just to get by. And over the years, things have become even more difficult. So they have less money to invest in their hobbies and giving themselves hope. So they're just trying to keep their head above water. So, it can affect people's mental health. They can have a lot of anxiety, can suffer from depression. This is exacerbated by the weather. This may not affect you as much depending on the weather that you're used to. However, biologically, it can still affect you. Having a lack of sunlight is a huge issue. You may not think it at first, but it will start to build up. So it's really, really essential to get some vitamin D. You can go to the doctor, you can have some blood work done to check out your current level of vitamin D and start to take that, because vitamin D is really important to not only make you feel better, give you a better sense of well-being, because we as humans, we need sunlight, we need daylight, and it helps us to regulate our day. Like, it's a day to start and to wake up, and our bodies release all those hormones. And it can also help with bone health. And it's very interesting. You see a lot of old people having problems with their joints and being able to walk. And by that point, it's difficult to improve because the damage has already been done. So it's really important to make sure that you're taking supplements. It's really, really important, and your physical health. When you start to feel down because the reality has hit you, you have to find a job or maybe another job. You have to pay for all of these expenses. People are unfriendly. They're not smiling at each other. They don't have time to say hello, ask how you are doing. It can feel very isolating. So unless you have already built up that bubble of friends, that circle, it's very difficult to find people who are willing to open up. And just in general, in terms of the day-to-day living, when you are walking past someone, people are either have their headphones in, looking at their phone, or looking down, not making eye contact. And after a while, that coupled with the gloomy, overcast weather, and not many people understand this, that most of the time it's grey. So you don't see anything, it's just greyness. And when you just see that grey, it can affect you. So you have to have systems in place. Get to a gym, join a gym as soon as you can, or have a system for, if you're unable to get to the gym, have a system, have a routine of getting some exercise regularly. Even when you don't want to, that's when you have to do it even more. Because when winter comes around and the clocks go back and it starts to get dark earlier and it's freezing cold, it will start to affect your mood. So you need to find ways to mitigate that. And during the winter, it's going to get cold. So you'll have to turn on your heating, but then you have to be mindful of the costs of your heating. So this is another reason why people understandably are stressed, because they're having to make this decision whether to heat their house or to save that money. So many people are using things like an electric blanket, putting on extra layers of clothes, because that cost, however small, adds up. Because when you go to put petrol in your car, or pay for a tube ticket, or putting money on your oyster for travel, you're now cognizant of the fact that I am spending money on this. And it didn't used to be this bad a number of years ago, but I think over time, with the costs increasing, you have to be a lot more mindful of how much you are spending. Unless you are emigrating with a large family, it's very difficult to raise a child, because if you don't have that family support, childcare costs are through the roof. They're so expensive. But then again, they have to be in line with the minimum living wage. And there are no exemptions from the government. There is no help really there. I know over the years they have started to introduce some support, but in general it's not enough. So it is extremely difficult, and sometimes it may be cost effective for one parent to be at home to look after the child, where the other parent has to work, but then this can add extra pressure. So raising a child with cost of The cost of childcare is incredibly difficult because it's so expensive. Unless you are living in a major city like London, which is very diverse, you may face racism as you travel outside of these busy areas. And that's something that you will have to be prepared for. And it will be a shock to your system because you've just moved to a different country. You've made that decision to change your whole life. It's incredibly expensive. You're working extremely hard. And then you have to face feeling excluded from the place that you've moved to. So it can be extremely challenging and very difficult. You may have moved for a safer life. However, in major cities, you can see that the crime rates are increasing. And why is this? If you look at things like antisocial behavior, you have a lot of young people who are disillusioned, are not spending their time in a productive way. Maybe they have lost hope for the future. And so you'll experience antisocial behavior. And the environment that you're in is not productive. It's not a good environment to naturally feel positive. So in times like this, it's really important to be prepared, to be ready, to make sure that your health is on point, focusing on exercise, focusing on trying to make new friends. And a lot of people in the UK actually want to make a friend. They feel lonely, but they don't know how to go about that. So if you come from a culture where it's natural to be smiling and to be more cheerful, then you can use that and just think to yourself, okay, I need to go first initially with introductions, joining clubs, and starting to build up a network, a group of friends. And that, with keeping in touch with people from back home that you know, that can help and that can keep you motivated. Understand that you may face feeling homesick, and feeling homesick is a real thing. And in times like this, try to remember that that feeling will lessen over time. And it can be quite traumatic because you cannot simply fly back because it's so expensive. If you are renting a place in the UK and you fly for a holiday, then you are still having to pay rent. So because things are so expensive, because the rent is so high and so expensive, it's not an easy decision to make. It could almost feel like a death because you're having to move on from something, and it may be a number of years before you can go back. And in times like this, really remember your why. Why did you move? The potential for a better life. Yes, the UK has gone downhill over the years with the previous government. Things like the NHS, which used to be fantastic, the strain put on that is at breaking point. You can be waiting an extremely long time to see a specialist. But in principle, having that national health care there in place is a great thing. You have the ability to travel within Europe. It's on your doorstep. And when you are feeling homesick and if depression starts to set in, I think in times like this, it's about making connections with other people and trying to get out. I think a lot of people, when they become isolated, they can make the problem bigger, but try to break things down into manageable steps. Give yourself time to adapt, but also look at the reality of the situation. A lot of people think the UK is a glamorous place. And when people are traveling back to their country and they seem to be living this fantastic lifestyle because they have a lot more money to spend, that can be due to the currency exchange rate. But they are still extremely stressed. So for them to be able to get rid of that stress for a while and to be seen to be successful, it can make them feel like that struggle was worth it. A lot of people, when they retire, eventually go back because the quality of life is so much better, especially when you're old, living in an extremely cold country, not just with the weather, but with the people. It can be extremely difficult to manage because you've worked your whole life and now you are towards the end, you want to have a good standard of living. And unfortunately, for most people, the day-to-day life in the UK is not a good quality of life. Many people are looking forward to the next holiday to escape. And when they have to come back, it's just working to fund that next break, if they can afford it, away. And it's a shame because the everyday life and your day-to-day existence should be one that is happy and that is a joy to live. But when people are struggling, and that's the reality, and you see homeless people because if they've just lost their job and they're unable to pay their rent and they do not have family support, becoming homeless is a reality, and it's a scary reality for many people. If they're unable to keep up payments on their home because things are very expensive, so now they have to take more jobs just to pay for that, but then that can affect their health, and then they may not be able to work because it's affected their health. So you have this strange, vicious cycle where you are just working to survive. And when you're in that mindset, in the beginning, it can be easy, not easy, but it could be easier because you can have motivation. But after a while, when things keep getting expensive, it can add to that feeling, add to that culture shock. If you've emigrated to the UK, let me know what has been your experience. What did you think of the UK before you left, and what do you think of the UK now?